are standards and there are limits to what voters will accept, even in this era of tribes, even in this era where Democrats and Republicans stick to their teams, root for their teams. There is still a point past which some people will not go. And that point in this race obviously has to do with the accusations, the allegations, ugly allegations of child sexual abuse against Doug Jones. Against Roy Moore, the judge. Second of all, obviously, the balance of power in the Senate is now 51 to 49.
Right.
And that makes it even tougher for legislation. As we've seen, a lot of these big major pieces of legislation that will affect people's lives have been defeated or have won only by 1 or 2 votes. And then third of all, I have to say, this is a huge defeat for President Trump.
Yes.
This is deep red Alabama. President Trump made the calculation that he was going to double down. He was going to stick with this candidate, the candidate who followed the Trump playbook for when there are allegations against you. Just deny them all and attack the people accusing you. And it failed. And it failed not only in an embarrassing way, it failed in one of the most Republican states that there is. A state so Republican, the last time they elected a Democrat to the Senate, 2 years later, he changed parties and became a Republican. This is deep, deep red. Trump trounced Hillary Clinton in this state, but tonight, a Democrat won, and it's a resounding rejection of everything that Republican and what President Trump was standing for.
When President Trump chose Jeff Sessions, the then senator from Alabama, to be his attorney general, no one even considered the notion of what we're seeing right now, that a Democrat could be the one to win his seat. But it is this stunning turn of events, particularly within the Republican Party, and the fact that they had such a flawed candidate. Republican after Republican told me, and I'm sure you too, Jake, that this is probably the worst Republican candidate that they have fielded in forever. And so that really has come back to haunt Republicans. The irony of this, the irony is that you're seeing and hearing the cheering at the Democrats' headquarters because they won. I guarantee you there is cheering, and if not cheering, a very loud sigh of relief among Republicans in the Senate. They don't have to deal with expulsion. They don't have to deal with Roy Moore around their neck, dealing with having the idea that there is a Republican senator who did the things that he did allegedly in terms of abuse and everything else that he stood for.
The thing is also, in terms of the big fight that we've been seeing every day since President Trump, since Donald Trump entered the race, of establishment Republicans versus the insurgent Republicans or the disrupting Republicans, Bannon and Trump. The establishment Republicans were so against Roy Moore. As John noted, the senior Republican senator, Richard Shelby, actually came on my show on Sunday and basically told Republicans, write in a candidate.
Yes.
The majority leader, the Speaker of the House, all of Ivanka Trump, all of them against Roy Moore. The head of the National Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, Senator Cory Gardner, Republican of Colorado, very conservative senator. He would not endorse or support Roy Moore in any way. Jeff Flake, conservative Republican senator from Arizona, sent a check to Doug Jones, the Democrat. They were completely against it. But the Trump-Bannon wing, they were all in.
And there's another, we can see Charles Barkley, by the way, at Doug Jones' headquarters there. Charles Barkley, of course, an Alabama native, and went down and did a lot of heavy campaigning for Doug Jones. But you mentioned Donald Trump. I cannot tell you how hard the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, begged and pleaded with the President of the United States, according to people I talked to, not to go all in on Roy Moore, not to endorse him, not to put his own reputation on the line, but more importantly, try to help Roy Moore. And now, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, Mitch McConnell was right. He wasn't trying to save Donald Trump from himself. He was trying to save the reputation of the Republican Party in the United States Senate. But looking back, if the president had heeded those warnings and those calls from his Republican counterpart in the United States Senate, he wouldn't have this embarrassment tonight. And it is an embarrassment. There's no question about it. That President Trump, against the advice of so many people, went all in for Roy Moore and he lost.
And the thing is, he was advised not to by people in the White House. People in the White House tried to keep him out of this race, but he insisted he wanted to be in that race. And the thing is, this is not the last time you're going to hear Roy Moore's name in this election, in this election cycle, yes. But Roy Moore is going to be hung around Donald Trump's neck in 2020, and perhaps if he wins, and beyond that. But this is going to be a major issue. Donald Trump supported this alleged child sexual abuser. That charge doesn't go away anytime soon. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. I want to go to our panel. I mean, Bakari, you actually campaigned for Doug Jones. Obviously, you're very happy.
I mean, for me, there are two things. I mean, the raw emotion of victory on election night is something that Democrats haven't felt in a long time on a night like this, when it's been up and down and topsy-turvy. And so you just exude this joy. I mean, you're just so ecstatic right now. But there are two things that I think are apropos for tonight. The first is, I went down to Tuskegee, and at historically black colleges and universities, they have themed, cafeteria days. On Wednesday, it's like Fried Chicken Wednesday. On Friday, it's Seafood Friday. We went on Seafood Friday, and to watch the kids and everybody know who Doug Jones was and come to him, and he spent time talking to every single person, every single voter, and he talked to the cafeteria ladies, the people who were shaking hands. For him to get this victory means so much. But even more importantly than that, we read all the articles about the Washington Post and the New York Times and Huffington Post, everybody going down there and talking to black voters about black voters not being excited or coming out. You know what won this race? The box that came in? Selma, Alabama. Selma, Alabama tonight turned Alabama into a blue state, even if it is just for a moment. So you have to sit back. We will worry about how he's going to legislate in a red state tomorrow, but tonight there are a lot of people who are drinking Hennessy in Alabama, and we are excited about the victory, and y'all got to let us have that.
Roy Moore turned Alabama to a blue state, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump, I love you, Jake, but to say that this is on Donald Trump tried to rescue a campaign that was doomed. And he put everything in to try to rescue it. It wasn't his candidate. He didn't endorse him in the primary.
He went all let's have Jake. I want Jake to be able to respond.
I just want to clarify. I don't want to get in disagreement. Obviously, this is Roy Moore's loss. No question. My point is it's a loss also for President Trump because he attached himself to Roy Moore.
He attached himself to Roy Moore only to try to save a campaign that was doomed. And I don't think anyone would suggest that Roy Moore would have won the race had Donald Trump not been in this race.
President Trump, I'm sure President Trump made it much more competitive. There's no question about that. The point is, the calculation that some of his advisors and Republicans on the Hill were making was, this guy is going to lose, and he has this taint of these horrific allegations. President Trump, don't get involved in this, but President Trump, thinking that he is his own best political strategist, opted not to do it. But I completely agree with you. This loss is Roy Moore's, and any other normal Republican would be winning tonight. But I think that it was a questionable decision by the president to choose to tie himself to this
that's
anchor.
not what you said, but I do accept the fact that he did not make, well, in the end, he didn't make a wise decision to endorse him because we're lost. But you can say that at least he fought for what he thought was important, which is that 50-second vote. You yourself said that it's going to be very difficult for Republicans to pass any legislation, and Donald Trump is the president, and he wants to pass that legislation.
With all due respect to everyone around the table, tonight is not about Donald Trump. Tonight is not about Roy Moore. We hashed all of that out. The reason that the Democratic Party won is because we had a legitimate candidate to run up against a flawed candidate, and we have to embrace Doug Jones. He ran the perfect race for this moment.
And can I just say, we should say a big thank you to Alabamans. I mean, it was Democrats, it was independents, it was moderate Republicans.
It was mothers, it was young, everybody.
I'm just saying, this is such a great night. And for Alabama and for Democrats, Bakari, we are just... it's so great. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's not just Alabama.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel.
I don't think you can dismiss the Trump factor in this race. I look at this race and I think the reckoning has continued. It has gone down to Alabama because Donald Trump across the country, look at what happened in Virginia, the governor's race where Republicans got blown out. This is the second time And Donald Trump, his mistreatment of women, the hostility towards minorities has activated something within the country where Republicans, Jeff Sessions won that seat by more than 90% in 2014. Any Republican should have won that seat by double digits in their sleep. And Republicans lost it tonight. If they don't think it's about Donald Trump, they're drinking that Hennessy with the Democrats.
And let me just add, and this is something that the governor said before, which is that candidate recruitment now for Democrats is going to go crazy. It's because they believe they can win. And the civil war in the Republican Party, not to say there aren't any differences among Democrats, but in the Republican Party is going to get even worse. Just tonight, the Senate Leadership Fund issued a statement. CEO Steve Law there said, "This is a brutal reminder that candidate quality matters regardless of where you are running. Not only did Steve Bannon cost us a critical Senate seat in one of the most Republican states in the country, but he also dragged the President of the United States into his fiasco." Okay? That is a Republican pack, and the NRSC was a little more politic, but basically said the best candidate won in different words.
But can I just say a few things? One is, I want to echo one thing Bakari said. Just as someone who practiced this campaign politics for a long time, Doug Jones ran an extraordinary campaign. He had a very narrow needle to thread, and he threaded it very well. And, including, not bringing national politicians into the state until the end, working the African-American communities very, very hard. And that turnout made the difference. The turnout in the African-American communities relative to these white rural counties was much, much higher. And that was the difference in this race. But it also is true that it was a very, very cynical play to try and drag Roy Moore, who was so deeply flawed, across the line. Whenever you have to hide your candidate for the last week and put him in a witness protection program of some sort, or that is a bad sign. And everyone who supported him or tacitly supported him were complicit in that strategy. And it was what Rick said. They wanted that 50-second vote. But some things trump even a 50-second vote, and that's not a pun. And one of them is fundamental decency. Yes. And that is a lot of what you heard tonight in Alabama.
Yeah, and I think Charles Barkley, in many ways, made a very effective argument to voters in Alabama, too, which is this the message we want to send to the nation and to the world about Alabama? Southerners have struggled so long in terms of their reputation, in terms of the history, and the difficult history, particularly along racial lines that has existed in the South. So he said, send a message. Essentially, don't make us look stupid on the national stage. That was his message to a lot of voters, and I think a lot of them took his advice.
The other thing I think it's important to note here, the United States Senate is in play in 2018. That's not something we would have said before tonight. Democrats have to run the table. They have to have a perfect year. I'm not saying it's going to be easy for them at all. But for the entire year this year, looking at the landscape, it was all about the House of Representatives being the thing that's in play next year. You're now at a 51-49 split instead of 52-48. It is impossible, looking at the Democratic enthusiasm that we've talked about in all these elections, whether they've won or lost, to not say that the control of the United States Senate in next year's midterms is now in play.
I would also add, and Dana would know a lot more about this than me, but I think there were the other happenstance winners here were people like Susan Collins, Bob Corker, Flake, who now are more powerful in a Senate that is 51-49 rather than 52-48 and have more leverage.
Let's actually bring in Dana. Dana, do you want to weigh in on that?
No, absolutely. It's the people who are on the fence on many of these legislative fights they already had leverage. Now they're going to have even more leverage come early next year, because we should also make the point that Doug Jones is not likely to be actually seated until the beginning of January. So in the most immediate fight, which is over tax reform, This is something that Republicans already were trying to do by the end of the year, and you can bet that they're going to try even harder to get a House-Senate compromise and get something to the president's desk before the already thin margin in the Senate gets even thinner. And I can tell you, even before we got these results, I was emailing with a Republican senator who said that they were watching with one eye, but also working on this compromise on tax reform with the other in anticipation of the end of the year, but also what was happening in Alabama.
Senator Santorum, do you agree with David Chalian that the Senate could be in play?
Given the makeup of who's up, I think it's going to be still a stretch for the Senate to be in play this election cycle. Look, as bad a news as this is for Republicans, it is a very clear warning shot that, and I'm going to agree with Amanda here. I think the president's demeanor and the way he has been so hostile in attacking people, as I've said many times, it's just debilitating. It just wears out a lot of people who would otherwise look at this national economy, look at some of the other great things this administration is doing, and are just get worn out by it and worn out by the daily controversy coming out of the president's Twitter feed. And did that have an impact? I have no doubt that had an impact in Alabama. There's no doubt in my mind it softened the playing field. But to go back to my point, this is Roy Moore's loss. When Roy Moore had these charges brought against him on Jake's show, I said, get out of the race. There's no way you're going to win this race. As much as they tried to drag him across the finish line, there's no way he's going to win this race.
Loss,
and he should have gotten out of this race.
It is Donald Trump's loss. It is Steve Bannon's loss. And just watch. I'm curious to know tomorrow morning what is Donald. What is let me just finish. What is Donald Trump going to be tweeting tomorrow morning? Is he going to be trying to discredit this election? It was a fake election, that there were people who shouldn't have voted?
What he may be tweeting about actually is USA Today and their editorial.
Yes. USA Today, which is not known for its hot editorials, just had one this evening which said that President Trump has shown he is not fit for office. A president who would all but call Senator Kirsten Gillibrand a whore is not fit to clean the toilets in the Barack Obama Presidential Library or to shine the shoes of George W. Bush. So he might be tweeting about that tomorrow morning. But it's kind of stunning. And it speaks to the point that Senator Santorum is making, which is, why does he do this? Why does he do this to himself?
He is doing it to himself.
And it is self-destructive.
Let me ask a question about. I'm around the table with people who've been in politics a little bit longer than I. Have you seen Have you seen anybody who's gotten this far in life, never working for anybody else, change? I mean, are we expecting that this defeat tonight, or that anything that he said, or USA Today op-ed?
I mean, this has always been the question, Bakari, and being much closer in age to him than you, I will tell you that it gets hard to change, and he clearly is someone who hasn't shown that capacity to change or grow. He takes umbrage at every offense, and he responds in kind, and we saw that with Senator Gillibrand. And
I also want to show a tweet that Jeff Flake has just sent out. We're going to put it up on the screen. Decency wins.
But my only point in bringing that up is that Donald Trump is going to be the same Donald Trump in the 2018 elections. And what that means is, yes, the Democratic Party has a huge foil, but even more importantly than that, Donald Trump still controls the Republican base. So if Donald Trump goes in or Steve Bannon goes in and throws their weight around, there's still going to be a hard time for moderate, there are two states to watch out for. One is Nevada, the other is Arizona. Those are the two states.
Tennessee's now in play too.
I don't know about the.
Listen, Phil Bredesen running.
I'm gonna let you.
I want to make the point that what happened tonight makes it so that Donald Trump will be less willing to listen to anyone else in the Republican Party. He took Mitch McConnell's advice at first and got behind the wrong candidate, Luther Strange. Then he followed Steve Bannon's lead and got behind Roy Moore. Donald Trump lost twice listening to Republicans. So now he's going to turn.
He says he understands the voters
now I
better
believe
than almost
he will
any other
turn
state.
further inward and be even more unpredictable.
Well, this is Bakari, I think Rick and Amanda have made your point. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing from you guys tonight is that Donald Trump's behavior in office is a problem for the Republican Party.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I don't want to be basically, but like you just heard two hardcore Republicans say that.
I'm not sure this is breaking news.
Right.
But the thing is, he will not blame himself, as you know.
Not.
So tomorrow will be interesting. I'd love to be in a meeting with Mitch McConnell, who won't say, "I told you so, Mr. President," but I'd like to be in that meeting with Republican leaders as they try and hash out this tax reform bill. The president's supposed to speak. But what does he do? Who does he blame now? Ivanka? I mean, what is he?
Ivanka may have made the right call here.
The amazing thing about this discussion is, see, what we've been able to hide as Democrats is we have a problem as well. Because what we're trying to do is sort out what type of party we want to be. What Doug Jones showed tonight is that there is a wing in the party that wants a litmus test, and Doug Jones doesn't fit anybody's litmus test. Doug Jones shows, and Virginia shows, that the best candidates are those who are reflective of the values of their state. You can't have a national.
And there's Doug Jones. Let's listen in. That's his family has joined him on stage. He's obviously going to be speaking momentarily. Let's just listen in for a moment. Talked about the kind of race that Doug Jones ran. What did he do right?
Well, he stayed out of the sort of updraft of national politics. Focused very much on Alabama and Alabama issues. He didn't let himself. They tried to portray him as a sort of quintessential Washington liberal. He stayed out of that. He was very low key. He didn't jump on the Roy Moore thing in a craven way from the beginning, and he handled himself with dignity. But his organization built on the ground. There wasn't a Democratic organization to speak of in the state of Alabama statewide, and he had to build, and they had to build an organization to bring out the kind of vote that they brought today. And then the use of the Obama robocall, Governor Patrick, Cory Booker, and others who came in late. Of course, Bakari Sellers needs to be mentioned in this pantheon of political leaders. It was done at just the right time and just the right way. I mean, you always look great when you win, okay? Right. You're never as smart as you look when you win, and you're never as dumb as you look when you lose. But this was truly a well-conceived campaign, and it had to be to produce a result in a state like this.
Yeah, and then you had the write-ins, 18,000 or so went to the write-in, just wrote somebody in, the sort of Shelby effect there. Yeah. And then he just didn't do as well. Roy Moore didn't do as well with white women voters, even though he won them, but he just didn't perform as well as an average Republican. So all of those things that needed to happen, it was a perfect storm. He also used these Republican validators in his advertising very effectively. Right. Sessions and Shelby and Ivanka Trump. And that, I think, had some impact in dampening turnout.
Let's listen into Doug Jones.
Folks, I'm overwhelmed, but I want to let me first make a couple of kind of brief comments. You know, I have said throughout this campaign that I thought that December 12th was going to be a historic day. But I got to tell you, and you know where I'm headed, December 12th has always been a historic day for the Jones family. This is, as you know, mine and Louise's 25th wedding anniversary. My running mate. I could not have done this without her. The love, support, the encouragement. Earlier in the evening when she just kind of kicked me in the rear end when I was down. So this has been a wonderful night. I've got to thank my family. I've got my wonderful sons, Carson, Christopher, my daughter, Courtney, my beautiful granddaughter, her son-in-law, Rip, all these friends back here, U.S. attorney buddies, my mom who can make it here. My dad who's here with us in spirit, who's too ill, and unfortunately my sister Terry and her husband Scott, Terry Savage and Scott Savage. Hey girls, thank you. She couldn't make it either. I am truly overwhelmed. I am truly overwhelmed. But you know, folks, and you have all heard me say this at one point or another in this campaign, I have always believed that the people of Alabama had more in common than to divide us.